Good morning, Compass Online family. It is Friday, and welcome to Compass, our missions navigating people to God, one church in 1,000 locations. That is you right where you are. Join the conversation in the chat room on whatever platform you're watching on. Let us know who you're watching with, where you're watching from. We would love to know that. And as always, we're glad that you are here today to receive God's word and to worship with us. Welcome to Compass Daily.
And isn't it good just to worship together as the church this morning? I'm excited today because I've invited my friend Brooke Green to join us on Compass Daily. Brooke is in charge of K1. She's our K1 coordinator here at the church. And so after this season of COVID-19, when we all come back together and you can put your kids in programming, you get to take them to Brooke. She's not just a great staff member here, she's also a great worship leader, and so she's gonna lead us together right now in a song called The Goodness of God.
I've been held in your hand from the moment that I wake up until I lay my head. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful, and all my so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest nights. You were close like no other. I've known you as a father, I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful, and all my so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God.
Good morning, everybody. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Rob. I'm one of the pastors here at Compass. It's been a great honor and very humbling to be a part of Compass during this pandemic season. Watching how God has used Pastor Drew and the entire Compass family has been amazing. Your strength, your generosity, your resilience, and innovation has been a joy to see. We have been and we continue to be his body, the church. This week we're in a series about the best book I ever read. And I have been so thankful for the book recommendations so far. This is actually a topic I love. I used to teach a graduate course on readings for Christian spirituality, and I love talking about this subject. One of the things that I learned while teaching that course is that what makes a best book to one person is often very dependent on the circumstances surrounding that reading experience. So before I tell you the name of my book, let me tell you why it was so important to me. When I was 15 years old, I was not living as a Christian. I had had some really difficult experiences in my life, and I could not reconcile the idea of a God that loved us, what I was learning in church, with the way our family's life was going. And then when I was 16, one of my old brothers was killed in a car accident, and the very next month, our family went bankrupt and we lost all of our property. At that point in my life, I decided there could not be a God who loved us, and I walked away from the church completely. In fact, I actively searched out atheist writers, and I was fascinated with the way they portrayed science and all the opposition to religion. In spite of my youth, those arguments against God were so strong and so important in my life that it took a powerful experience with God to finally bring me back to Christ. That happened right about the time I was about to graduate from high school. So, right after high school, I went to a Christian college just to learn more about God. And I will tell you, as hard as I had fought against God earlier, I worked equally hard to try and please God. But what drove me crazy is that I kept failing all the time. I was trying to just muscle my way into being a good person, right? A good Christian, a good whatever. And after I got married, I wanted to be a good husband. But I kept failing miserably. I'd have a week or maybe even a month of doing things right, and then I would fall back into sin or laziness or depression or whatever it was. And I began to think to myself, I will never be a good Christian. And worst of all, I began to suspect that maybe Christianity just didn't work. All this as I'm just starting my marriage, finishing college, and starting my first job as a youth pastor. So in kind of a moment of fear, I reached out to one of my mentors named J.K., and he suggested I read the book, The Spirit of the Disciplines by Dallas Willard. I was looking for any kind of help, so I found it at a bookstore. I actually had to go in and purchase it. I took it to my tiny little office at my tiny little church that was upstairs behind the baptistry, behind the closets where they kept the baptismal clothing and towels and stuff, into the attic where my little tiny office was. And I was like, all right, I'm going to read this book. I started reading the first chapter, and the title of the first chapter was called The Secret of the Easy Yoke. And I got so excited in my little church office, and I was so wound up, I jumped up and I smacked my head on the slanted ceiling in my office. What he said in that chapter was so exciting. It was from the book of Matthew, chapter 11, verses 29 and 30, where Jesus is talking, and he says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, and I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Dallas Willard started teaching me that day that I didn't have to work so hard to be like Jesus. The idea was to do the kinds of things that Jesus did so that I could become the kind of person that Jesus was and is. I'll talk about that in a moment. Now, one of the things that really mattered to me about Dr. Willard was that he was a longtime professor of philosophy at the University of Southern California. So this is a guy who works at a secular university in a part of the world where Christianity was often mocked for being simple-minded, of no practical use. And here he is offering me this rigorous intellectual understanding about how to make the life of a disciple easy. It was like the converging of all these things from my past, my fear of being brainwashed by religion, and this simple, practical way of arranging my life all coming together. It was awesome. He introduced me to the idea that Jesus was good. Of course I knew that, but that he was also smart. Now, I will admit that after that first chapter, I did not understand most of the rest of the book. I finished it, but was honestly a little bit at a loss because of his intelligence and understanding. After all, I was only 22. But a year or so later, I read it again. And as of today, I have probably read that book more than 10 times. And it still amazes, encourages, teaches, and delights me. In my first ministry at that little country church and that little country office of my little thing, it gave me a passion and a roadmap to help students have practical ways they could experience Jesus outside of just information. As God moved Shannon and I to Amarillo, it shaped how I did worship, how we designed church camp, how we decided to train young leaders. In Mexico City, it informed me about how to preach and teach the easy yoke in a different culture and language. As a professor, it was instrumental in my classroom and was an essential part of my dissertation. And today, here at Compass, it is this constant underpinning of all of my work. As a group, we try to make the life of Jesus practical in our daily lives. It is this combination of rigorous intellectual work and down-to-earth practical living that makes it the best book I've ever read. That first chapter, The Secret of the Easy Yoke, it was so simple. He used this illustration. Think of a group of young people who idolize an outstanding baseball player. They want nothing so much as to pitch or run or hit as well as their idol. So what do? When they're playing a baseball game, they all try to behave exactly as their favorite baseball star does. The star is well known for sliding headfirst into bases, so the teenagers do too. The star holds his bat above his head, so the teenagers do too. These young people try anything and everything their idol does, hoping to be like him. They buy the type of shoes the star wears, the same glove he uses, the same bat. Will they succeed in performing like the star, though? We all know the answer quite well. We know that they won't succeed if all they do is try to be like him in the game, no matter how gifted they may be in their own way. And we all understand why. The star performer himself didn't achieve his excellence by trying to behave in a certain way only during the game. Instead, he chose an overall life of preparation of mind and body, pouring all his energies into that total preparation to provide a foundation in the body's automatic responses and strength for his conscious efforts during the game. Those exquisite responses we see, the amazing timing and strength that such an athlete displays, they aren't produced and maintained by the short hours of the game itself. They are available to the athlete for those short and all-important hours because of a daily regimen no one sees. That made so much sense to me. He goes on to explain that adopting the overall practices of Jesus will slowly turn our life into the kind of life that can easily do the things that Jesus would want us to do. Because that's how God set up our lives in general. Here's another quote. He says this: "Our mistake is to think that following Jesus consists in loving our enemies, going the second mile, turning the other cheek, suffering patiently, and hopefully, while living the rest of our lives, just as everyone around us does. This is like the aspiring young baseball players mentioned earlier. It's a strategy bound to fail and to make the way of Christ seem difficult and left untried. In truth, it is not the way of Christ, any more than striving to act in a certain manner in the heart of a game is the way of a champion athlete." Those were the words that caused me to jump out of my office chair and bang my noggin on the oak beams of the church roof. I had been trying to act like Jesus did when he was in the spotlight, not doing the things needed to be ready for the spotlight. Several weeks ago, we did a whole week on the spiritual disciplines of Compass Daily. Now, up until I read this book, I thought that the spiritual disciplines basically were for like super Christians, right? Or the naturally good person who does stuff like reading their Bible because they really just like it. But what I realized about Jesus was that he used all of those spiritual practices all of his life to prepare for the times that were most important. These were the kinds of things I needed to learn to be a good man, a good husband, a good employee, a good Christ follower. The same principle applies for anybody who wants to do well in their life. Like a soldier who takes their training seriously before the battle. Like a doctor who keeps up with the latest research before surgery. Like a farmer who keeps learning about how to tend their crops before the harvest. Like the business leader who learns about the market before the big contract. Like anyone who wants to grow, perform well, and enjoy their life and their work. Through this book, Jesus invited me, and he is inviting you to work alongside him to grow and to change. He will carry the burdens. We just have to keep in step. When my dad was a little boy, his dad still worked with a team of mules. And just one day asking, I said, Dad, what happens if one of your mules dies? You only got one mule. Come on, boy, you get another mule. I go, well, how do you train the new mule to do what the old mule does? And this is what he said. He said, you just tie them together real close, and that old one will start to teach the new one how to act and how to behave. And it just takes a little time walking together, and it just happens. That's what Jesus said about the easy yoke. You just have to spend time with him and do the things to be close to him. And when I started doing that, that is what changed my life. Let me make this so clear. I loved the book, but mostly because it put me in closer contact with Jesus, and that has made all the difference in my life. Here's another little bit from chapter 1. There's almost a universal belief today in the immense difficulty of being a real Christian. The vast, grim cost of discipleship is something we hear constantly emphasized. But it must not be left to stand as the whole truth. We would do far better to lay a clear and constant emphasis on the cost of non-discipleship as well. To depart from righteousness is to choose a life of crushing burden, failure, and disappointments. A life caught in the toils of endless problems that are never resolved. Here is the source of that unending soap opera, that sometimes horror show known as normal human life. This cost of discipleship, though it may take all we have, is small when compared to the lot of those who don't accept Christ's invitation to be a part of his company in the way of life. Y'all, it's this easy yoke idea that has brought life and light, joy and hope to me in the midst of my worst pains, the most difficult times, the deepest fears and the most depressing boredom. And the way of Jesus is not only good, it's wise. Now, if you're anything like me, you might think to yourself, I got to get that book. Now, let me give you a fair warning. If you want to read this book, you got to really want to read this book. You get me? It's not his only book on faith. So if you want to start reading Dallas Willard, a great starting point is his book called Revolution of Character. He wrote that with the help of an editor who made his kind of philosophical teaching more accessible to the normal person. But if you get into this, listen, I promise this is one of my best books. Compass, I want to tell you thank you for your generosity during this time. It might not feel like what you give is doing all that much, but that is not true. From India on the subcontinent to a Native American reservation, from Weatherford to Garland, from Decatur to South Dallas, and all in between, your generosity has been paving the way to feed, teach, love, and care for tens of thousands of people in DFW, and, quite literally, hundreds of thousands around the world. Jesus himself is using you to tell others about his love and good way of life. If you've not tried this discipline of giving yet, it's really easy. Click the Give button on your platform where you're watching, or text Compass Church to 77977. Hey, we love you guys. If you want to contact me about any of the other books from Dallas Willard, feel free to do that. If you're looking for any other reads, contact our staff. We love you. Have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.
Compass Online family, that wraps up another amazing week of Compass Dailies. Hey, as a reminder, if you missed a particular day, you can go to our YouTube channel or Facebook page and you can catch up and be a part of all the dailies throughout the week. We're so grateful for you, excited about the weekend as Pastor Drew continues in a series called We Didn't See It Coming. You don't want to miss this message. You don't want to miss the worship experience this weekend. Thank you for joining us here at Compass Online. Our mission is navigating people to God. You can do that from your computer, your tablet, your phone, wherever you're watching from. Just hit that share button. You never know who you can impact by today's message. God bless you and have an incredible weekend.